as inquiry, inquiry can also be inquiring into the root of anything. So let's say a certain feeling or a thought is coming up. If you just ask yourself, where is this arising from? Which is a different question, by the way, from why am I having this feeling, right? Because then that leads us into self-analysis. Why am I having this feeling? Oh, it's because my mother was mean to me when I was 5. No, we're not talking about that. And that might have its place. But here we're talking about sort of feeling into the depths of your being. Where is the emotion? Where are all the emotions? Where are the thoughts arising from? And you find they're arising from this space of pure nothingness or pure presence. Same thing. So just feeling into the root. Where is this arising from? Or where is it dissolving to? When a thought goes, when it disappears, where is it dissolving to? That's much harder for most people, because as soon as you kind of look to see where it goes, usually what happens is they give the thought a little energy and it comes back up again. But it's fundamentally the same thing. Where is it arising from? Where is it dissolving to? That inquiry, leads you down. It leads you into the great stillness, the great silence. Contemplation is the same thing, but using a sutra or a spiritual teaching from the tradition, and just asking yourself, what does this feel like, or what is at the root of it, or where does it arise from within me? Contemplation, again, is one of those practices that can be done in a Shakti way or a Shiva way. So when you let the sutra lead you beyond itself into a space of pure presence, that's the Shiva practice. So there's not many Shiva practices. In fact, there's really only one in a few variations. And then there's hundreds of thousands of Shakti practices. And that's exactly the nature of things. There's one ground of being, one formless absolute, and then there's a million diverse manifestations. But the point is, the realization that we're invited to is in the non-dual tradition, is Shiva is Shakti. Shakti is Shiva in another form. In the Buddhist tradition, in the Heart Sutra, they said the same thing in these words: form is emptiness, emptiness is form. So the realization that you have ultimately, and this is a fairly kind of an advanced realization, is that all form, all expression, all manifestation is an expression of the formless absolute. The pregnant nothingness that underlies all things and interpenetrates all things is constantly expressing itself in infinite forms. And even those infinite, well, we don't know if the manifest universe is infinite from the point of view of physics, right? There's a current debate about this, and it's very possible that the universe is just very, very, very large and not actually infinite. And that would make sense in light of the Tantra tradition, which says that all manifestation, it forms just a tiny, tiny part of the field of absolute potential. And it would be, if it was infinite, it would be hard to say that, I guess. Anyway, I digress. These talks are spontaneous. Hope you don't mind. So, Shakti practices, countless Shakti practices, just like there's countless kinds of beings. But what forms do they primarily take? I'll tell you. Practices that work with the body, practices that work with the energy body, and practices that work with the mind. So now all three of these are actually on a continuum. They're not three separate things. There's a continuum. The energy body actually is the mind in its more extended sense, in its fuller sense, as it interpenetrates and interrelates with the physical body. And there's no, in this tradition, there's not a mind-body connection. There's a spectrum, a crossfade, as it were, which is much stronger than just connection, if you see what I mean. Just as we might say that the mind is the subtlest part of the body, The body, likewise, is simply the most tangible manifestation of the mind. So it's a perfect continuum in that sense. So having said that, in the Tantric tradition, the idea is that our minds are programmed with our cultural and social and psychological conditioning, and that this conditioning is so kind of dense that it forms a veil or obscuration so that we're not able to recognize our true nature, even though our true nature is expressing itself all the time. It's right in front of you all the time. I mean, not literally, because your true nature, is the source from which you see. It can't be seen as an object, right? But it's right in front of you all the time in the sense that it's constantly manifesting or expressing itself, and yet it's not recognized exactly for what it is because of the denseness of this mental conditioning. So what do we do to work with that density? Well, we do practices like vikalpakshaya, which means dissolving your stories. And this is a great kind of tantric practice of destabilizing your accepted interpretation of reality, and so that you can see that even though you can find evidence for your beliefs, you can also find evidence for every contrary belief, and therefore beliefs can't capture reality. They can't represent reality, no matter how intricate or nuanced they get. So we have a teacher here in the modern era, alive today, who teaches this practice. She's not trained in the tantric tradition, but she does teach vikalpakshaya, dissolution of story, and that is Byron Katie, who just intuitively kind of developed a method of working with and dissolving your stories and beliefs about reality, which is very aligned with the tantric tradition, even though she didn't source it from that tradition. So vikalpakshaya, dissolution of your mental constructs or interpretations of reality, realizing that no interpretation of reality has any special priority, because for every story you can come up with and find evidence for, you can find evidence for all the opposites as well. So they all equally might capture some fragment of truth, but none of them are strictly true as an interpretation. So that's an important example of a Shakti practice where you're working with the mind, and you're kind of working the mind through a process which allows it to let go a little bit. But even more prominent in the original Tantric tradition is visualization practice, where you visualize, well, there's many kinds of visualization practices, but in deity yoga, you visualize the deity that you're working with, and again, in the non-dual version, as an expression of your own essence nature. And you visualize do this whole elaborate mental worship where you're kind of worshiping this deity who is, of course, again, your essence. And you are doing this elaborate mental worship all in your head. And a lot of detail has to be put into this. Why? Because the tradition suggests you spend most of your time just cycling through habitual conditioned thought patterns. And what you need to do is give your mind something else to focus on, and let that focal point be something that shifts the paradigm within the mind and imagination. So instead of using your imagination to imagine possible futures to chase after or to be afraid of, you use that same power of imagination to enter the divine world, as it were, to visualize these deities and so on, which were, of course, in the original tradition, were embedded within a cultural context which gave them kind of meaning in life that we don't have as much access to if you grew up in a totally different culture, right? But still, the principle is sound, which is to divert the enormous mental energy that you put into worry and anxiety and fantasy, and take that mental energy and direct it towards your awakening. So in other words, the visualization practices were asanas for the mind and were absolutely crucial to the tradition. And I you know, in a certain sense, to not have them, to be doing asanas only of the body and not the mind is basically not going to work from the tantric tradition. It's not going to produce the fruit that you're going for if you're going for awakening / liberation. So, you know, of course, also visualization practice involving your own energy body. So that I mentioned in the last class, the idea of the energy body with its chakras, energy centers, its nadis or channels, and a whole variety of kind of, the energy body is like visualized as a complexification of light. It's a light body. And all the structures of the energy body are made of pure energy. They're made of light in different colors and shades. And there's all this kind of wonderful detail you can get into. And that allows you to start to tune into where you're holding perhaps traumas or old pain or rigidity in your system. You know, it starts to become more apparent to you. You want to find that before it manifests on the physical body level. When it manifests on the physical body level, it's already really, really deeply implanted in you, you know. So, you know, theoretically anyway, in the tantric tradition, you could, most people could maintain perfect health by being so intimate with their energy body that they feel a kind of imbalance there way before it shows up in the physical body, because the energy body is the template, as it were, for the physical body. So much more could be said about this. So a lot of practices that might seem inherently meaningless at first to people who, you know, didn't grow up in this in the culture which gave rise to Tantra, can be seen to have a lot of deep meaning as you kind of explore the tradition a lot more. So one example, just to give an example of a classical tantric practice, is Bhuta Shuddhi, and that means the purification and recalibration of the elements. So the 5 primary elements, earth, water, fire, wind, space, are visualized within the human body. And there's this whole practice of you visualize the earth element, in this case as a golden yellow cube, and then that earth element, you visualize it dissolving upward into the water element, and you visualize that dissolving upward into the fire element, fire into wind, wind into space, space into essence, as you do a mantra with each stage. And some people do specific mudras as well. And this is the heart of tantric yoga. The coming together of mantra, mudra, visualization. So mantra is mantra synchronized with breath, of course. Mudra is a physical gesture or posture, and visualization. So the imagination is engaged with the practice too. All parts of you are engaged, in other words. So more than anything else, this is what typifies original tantric yoga. Mantra, mudra, visualization in concert, entrained together in a single flow. And I just gave the example of that one practice. And then, of course, you come back down to earth. Essence emanates space, space emanates wind, wind emanates fire, fire emanates water, water emanates earth. Most tantrikas in the original tradition would do this practice every day. And in this way would get in touch with the fundamental qualities of existence and allow them to recalibrate within their system. And so I just give that as an example of a practice that doesn't necessarily make much sense from outside the tradition, but does from within as part of a kind of network of interrelated practices. One other practice I'll mention is uchara. This is another practice that most tantrikas did every single day. And uchara is, okay, so you know there's a central channel, Sushumna Nadi, or Madhya Nadi, a central channel running from the pelvic floor to the crown of the head, a kind of column of light or a column of energy running through the center of the body. And this can be visualized as a column of golden light or white gold light, or a column of cobalt blue light, depending on your lineage. So at any rate, Uchara is chanting a bija mantra or a seed syllable like Om, but imagining that sound vibration is also a light vibration. It's a point of light rising through the central channel as you chant Om or one of the other bija mantras like Hreem or Shreem or Haum. So I just give this an example so you know what the practices of the original tradition were like. Of course, there's so many more, but this is just a very prototypical practice. So in Uchara, then it's impossible to really demonstrate because there's a lot of stuff happening internally. But essentially, I breathe in all the way down to the pelvic floor, gentle Mula Bandha, and I initiate the resonance of Om, and I let it rise from the pelvic floor up and out the crown of the head, pausing at the level of the palate to vibrate in the nasal cavity in order to break a psychic blockage that exists there. So it's kind of like this. And then again and again and again and again. Doing that Om on every exhale for, a few dozen rounds or a few hundred rounds. It can be a powerful practice. It can create a lot of energy. It's not recommended for those who get ungrounded easily. So that's called Uchara. And again, there's more to it, but that's a little bit. And it's a synesthetic, remember. As you are chanting, you're imagining a light rising through the central channel, and the light is the sound. And it pauses here for a little bit and then rises up and out the crown of the head. So in each round of Uchara, then you're recapitulating the whole life cycle, because when you finish the exhale and pause the breath without taking the inhale, it's a little death, as it were. It's a complete surrender. It's an offering of yourself into the whole universe. And there's a kind of gentle Uddiyana Bandha that happens there at the end too. It's a moment of complete stillness, a moment of complete silence. And if you don't take another breath, that's it, you're dead, right? So it is the little death, as it were. And then you do take another breath, but as a choice. You're choosing this life, you're choosing this embodiment, you're choosing to be here consciously. And so coming into embodiment, So in that way, recapitulating the life cycle and the two aspects of the spiritual path, which are simply, in their essence, the spiritual path is all about surrender to the universe, as it were, and again and again choosing to engage intimately with the real circumstances of this life and all that it has to offer you.